Lee Kuan Yew, born 16 September 1923, passed away 23 March 2015. Often referred to by his initials LKY, was a Singaporean lawyer, politician, and statesman who served as the founding Prime Minister of Singapore between 1959 and 1990. He was one of the greatest nation builders in the 20th and 21st centuries, or some even say, the greatest nation builder of all time. Lee Kuan Yew had very high regard for Vietnam, which he considered to be the most dynamic of all ASEAN countries. He foresaw that in 20 years Vietnam will be a small tiger or a little dragon. In Lee Kuan Yew's own words,
Vietnam I consider to be the most dynamic of all the ASEAN countries. You work there, you know. I've been there since 1992. They're energetic, they're intelligent, they're determined to make up for 40 plus years of war. We give scholarships to all our ASEAN neighbors, and the Vietnamese students are the most serious, the most intelligent, and score high marks, and they go back to build Vietnam. So I would say in 20 years, Vietnam will be a small tiger or a little dragon.
Next, we go back in history to the years of America-Vietnam War in the 1960s and 70s, where even then, the young Lee Kuan Yew's views were much sought after. Here, Lee Kuan Yew shares his views on the war and hope for peace. In his own words,
so all I would like to say as an outsider is, will we all, in the name of humanity and for the sake of human civilization, take great care that there is no miscalculation on the reactions not only of the North Vietnamese, but of the Russians and of the Chinese, because there must be a point at which they must react. You have adopted this position in Vietnam. In 1954, you never asked the rest of Southeast Asia, and we were not consulted. You had your last chance when Diem got knocked down by a bus, or perhaps it was a tank, and you could have got out and said to the generals, well, we'll help you, guns, food, uniforms, pay for the troops. But you decided, rightly or wrongly, to go in. And now this is 1967. And it's no use asking me now, for my opinion, what you should have done before. All I can say is, we've got to live with today, not with what might have been day before yesterday.
And Lee Kuan Yew foresaw that good leadership can make all the difference for Vietnam.
I think they wouldn't mind my saying that the world will be a much better place if it's not Mr. Rusk explaining what this is all about, but either their president or their vice president, or better still, a new figure in a prime minister. You know,
yes,
forward-looking,
South Vietnam,
forward-looking, independent, determined, and most important, sincere and honest.
Tough, durable, smart, Lee Kuan Yew of Singapore is not, as his rivals have discovered, a man to mess around with. But his track record is such that when he expresses his opinions, which he does with a bluntness that is uncharacteristic in this part of the world, everyone, including Washington, pays attention.
The Vietnamese decided to flout Chinese views and interests and attacked Cambodia and got themselves locked in a long struggle now with China. So the whole picture altered. The rules of the game, so to speak, their game of eating up little chunks of the world, they themselves changed. And we profited. Fortuitously, they brought about a situation where they were snarled in, and whilst they are frittering away their resources in more conflict and war, the rest of Southeast Asia zooming away. More trade, more investments, more growth, better homes, better life, better jobs.
Lee Kuan Yew also thinks highly of the Vietnamese people. In 2013, he says, in his book, One Man's View of the World,
"The Vietnamese are among the most capable and energetic people in Southeast Asia. Their students who come to Singapore on ASEAN scholarships are serious about their studies and score the highest grades."
Next, we look at Lee Kuan Yew's contribution to Vietnam's progress as an economic advisor. He sees the great potential of Vietnam and even played a very important role in Vietnam's path to progress. And in a 1985 interview, Lee Kuan Yew views the war in Vietnam and occupation of Cambodia as lost years for Vietnam. Vietnamese occupation of Cambodia lasted 10 years from 1979 to 1989. This was widely condemned by the international community. By 1985, the Vietnamese realized that it was too costly and concluded it was in their best interest to leave. However, it took another 4 years before they could disentangle themselves from the quagmire in Cambodia. In his memoirs, From Third World to the First, Lee Kuan Yew said, in 1990, in Davos for a World Economic Forum, Vo Van Kiet, the first vice chairman of the Council of Ministers of Vietnam, asked to see me. He hoped we would set aside differences and cooperate. I regretted so much time had been lost in their occupation of Cambodia since December 1978. Until that conflict was resolved, there could be no government-to-government ties. In October 1991, Vietnam and all parties signed agreements in Paris for a comprehensive political settlement. A week later, Vo Van Kiet, now Prime Minister, visited Singapore. He asked whether I would help Vietnam by becoming their economic advisor. After exchange of letters, I agreed to visit them, not as an advisor, but to brainstorm ideas to change to a free market economy. I went to Hanoi in April 1992. I spent a whole day with Vo Van Kiet and his team of ministers and top officials. I suggested that they study the process through which Taiwan and South Korea had transformed themselves from agricultural into newly industrializing economies. A good strategy, I said, would be to use South Vietnam, especially Ho Chi Minh City, as a dynamo to get growth going for the whole country. Since the April 1992 Hanoi visit, Lee Kuan Yew made many further visits to Vietnam. Milestone in Vietnam, Singapore relationship. In 1999, Prime Minister Vo Van Kiet asked Mr. Lee Kuan Yew to be Vietnam's economic advisor. This started an era of close personal relationship between successive generations of leaders from both Vietnam and Singapore. In 1994, Singapore Prime Minister Chok Tong proposed the idea of Vietnam-Singapore Industrial Park, VSIP, to Vietnam Prime Minister Vo Van Kiet. Vietnam had also seen rapid growth since the Doi Moi Reforms started in 1986. In 1995, Vietnam joined ASEAN, thus increasing tremendously the connectivity and exchanges in business, trade, and investments with regional countries including Singapore. In 2013, Vietnam Prime Minister Nguyen Thanh Dung and Singapore Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong officially announced the elevation of the two countries' friendship and comprehensive relationship to a strategic partnership.
Fast forward to today, there are now 18 Vietnam-Singapore industrial parks, of which 9 are completed and another 9 are in the pipeline, covering a total licensed areas of 11,588 hectares.
For perspective, this is about 20% of Singapore's land size of 58,150 hectares before reclamation. Boosted by the Vietnam-Singapore industrial parks, Singapore bilateral trade and investments with Vietnam have grown by leaps and bounds. Vietnam's bilateral merchandise trade growth with Singapore saw a 7.2% per annum increase over the last 10 years, from $17 billion in 2013 to $31 billion in 2023, making Singapore Vietnam's 11th largest trading partner. As at end of 2023, Singapore is the second largest foreign investor in Vietnam, with a cumulative investment of almost $75 billion. Will the era of close personal relationship between successive generations of leaders from both Vietnam and Singapore continue?
Prime Minister Phan Minh Chinh, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to be here for today's conference. This year marks 2 special milestones for Singapore and Vietnam. First, we're celebrating 50 years of our diplomatic relations between our two countries. And secondly, we are marking the 10th year of our strategic partnership. Singapore is happy and honored to play a role in Vietnam's economic development over many years. 10 years ago, I visited Vietnam for the 40th anniversary of our diplomatic relations. And at that time, I attended the groundbreaking ceremony of VSIP Quang Ngai in central Vietnam, and that was the 5th VSIP at that time. Since then, VSIP has grown from strength to strength. Now there are a total of 13 industrial parks across 9 provinces in northern, central, and southern Vietnam. Altogether, the VSIP projects span over 11,000 hectares with more than 900 tenants, $18 billion worth of capital investments, and close to 300,000 jobs. Today, we witness the addition of new VSIP projects to the expanding portfolio and the groundbreaking ceremonies for several further VSIP projects. And this reflects the strong partnership between Singapore and Vietnam and our shared confidence in Vietnam's growth and future. Indeed, the VSIP is a story of continuous innovation and progress. For example, the first VSIP in Bin Dung focused on light manufacturing. Then, Bin Dung 2 featured modern logistics facilities. And now, Bin Dung 3 will be a smart and green industrial park with an on-site solar farm. And it will incorporate smart technology across the farm's operations and meet Singapore's green mark for industrial districts. I'm happy to note that Bin Dung 3 will be home to Lego Group's first carbon-neutral factory in the world. The continued strength of our VSIP projects reflects the strong bilateral and economic relationship between Vietnam and Singapore. Our bilateral merchandise trade grew at 7.2% per annum over the last decade, from $17 billion in 2013 to $31 billion last year. And as of the end of 2022, Singapore was Vietnam's second largest foreign investor with a cumulative investment of $71 billion. I'm very happy with this visit. I have been in Vietnam probably about 10 times over now maybe more than 20 years and seen how this country has grown, has changed, and is full of energy. Young people wanting to get ahead, working very hard, trying all ways to improve their lives and to take the country forward. And between Singapore and Vietnam, we have a lot of cooperation. We've had diplomatic relations this year, 50 years. We've had what we call a strategic partnership between Singapore and Vietnam this year, 10 years. I signed it 10 years ago on a visit here with then Prime Minister Nguyen Tan Dung. Therefore, I feel good and I look forward to visiting Vietnam again and again for many years to come.
Judging from Senior Minister Lee Hsien Loong's Singapore Prime Minister from 2004 to 2024 visit to Vietnam in 2023, the prospects are good. Epilogue: Lee Kuan Yew was widely known as the founding prime minister who built Singapore from third world to first. But he helped other countries too. Vietnam is one of them.